You're reneging on responsibilities, Mr. Secretary. And you're also, being the senior person here, your behavior to some of my colleagues is absolutely childish. Thank you.
This may look like a heated back and forth, but it's actually a referendum on oversight itself. What's really being tested here is whether executive power can sidestep responsibility when the stakes involve consumer credit and federally backed housing markets. This raises broader questions about how accountability works when authority is fragmented across agencies, but taxpayer exposure remains centralized. In this video, we'll break down how a single exchange reveals the fault lines between legislative scrutiny and executive restraint, and why that tension matters for democratic governance.
Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, the President announced on January 9th, in his words, quote, effective January 20th, 2026, I, as President of the United States, am calling for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. In remarks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the President further said, quote, the profit margin for credit card companies now exceeds 50%. He also indicated that Americans are paying 28, 30% interest rates. You were one of his top economic advisors, Mr. Secretary. Do you support interest rate caps to improve affordability on credit?
I wholeheartedly support President Trump's policy, and I think that what you've just said would be in direct contrast to what Senator Warren said about this administration favoring the big banks. But those are facts.
Well, I don't think my statement indicates at all what Senator Warren said or meant. I wanted an answer. You gave me one. Yep. But let's look at the current situation. We already have legislation that protects service members by putting a 36% cap, not just on credit cards, but all credit relationships. And it protects them from being exploited. And as in my youth, I was the company commander and saw it firsthand. Would it make sense as a first step to provide a 36% interest rate for all Americans, not just service members?
36% doesn't seem like much protection to me, Senator.
Well, it's better than some of the things that are being presented to service members without the rates. These new plans to buy commodities, and sometimes the rates go to 500, and still today, you have entrepreneurs who are charging extraordinary rates, and particularly to vulnerable populations, which I know they don't congregate at Harvard Square, but they also don't hang out in New Haven either. So I think that would be a sound step, Mr. Secretary.
Senator, you haven't seen all of New Haven.
I haven't, but I've seen a lot of it, the parts that you might have missed. The situation at Freddie and Fannie and Freddie is significant. We have significant federal interest financially in Fannie and Freddie. But under the director, Mr. Pulte, these taxpayer-owned assets are no longer in compliance with the law or with stock exchange listing standards. Pulte has appointed himself as director of both boards, even though the law says, quote, the director may not hold any office, position, or employment in Fannie or Freddie. A majority of the Fannie board has not been determined to be independent. The audit committee is no longer comprised entirely of independent members, and the governance has been sacked by political affiliates. These all are prohibited by law and regulation. So how will you bring them into compliance, Mr. Secretary?
That would be FHFA, not Treasury.
Excuse me. You are one of the largest, or the taxpayers are. You provided them, Treasury did, not you personally, a $200 million bailout in 2008. You have no interest in Fannie and Freddie?
I'm very interested in Fannie and Freddie, and I'm interested in fulfilling the mission to the American people to keep mortgage rates low.
What about following the laws?
So again, you should ask Director Pulte. I do not see I don't think this creates a.
Well, all right, you have nothing to do with Fannie and Freddie. Director Pulte has said that you and him are, quote, very aligned, and we meet regularly about the conservatorship. By the way, it's in conservatorship because of Secretary Paulson, your predecessor. According to Fannie and Freddie's annual reports, the companies, quote, continue to rely on financial support from Treasury pursuant to our senior preferred stock purchase agreement, under which taxpayers own 1 million preferred shares and a warrant to purchase up to 80% of their shares. Treasury staff manages those shares and warrants for the taxpayers. Your predecessor, Hank Paulson, placed these companies into conservatorship. So you have the premise or the power to place Fannie and Freddie into conservatorship. I would think that gives you a little bit of leverage talking to Mr. Pulte about why he's not following the law. You're reneging on responsibilities, Mr. Secretary. And you're also, being the senior person here, your behavior to some of my colleagues is absolutely childish. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
What we just witnessed in this hearing was not a minor disagreement over policy details or a technical dispute buried in regulatory language. It was a moment of raw exposure, a moment where the distance between public responsibility and personal accountability collapsed in real time. Senator Jack Reed looked directly at the Treasury Secretary and questioned not just the numbers, not just the statutes, but the seriousness with which power itself is being exercised. It began with a simple question, a question rooted in the president's own words, a proposed cap on credit card interest rates, a claim that profit margins have soared while Americans struggle under rates nearing 30%. These were not abstract figures. These were facts already placed on the public record. And yet, as the exchange unfolded, something deeper emerged: evasion, deflection. A quiet shifting of responsibility from one agency to another, from one official to someone conveniently not in the room. When Senator Reed invoked existing protections for service members, when he spoke from lived experience and asked why similar safeguards could not extend to the rest of the country, the response was telling. Not urgency, not concern, but minimization. As if the scale of the problem itself was negotiable. As if what qualifies as protection depends on who is being protected. Then the focus shifted from credit cards to housing, from interest rates to institutions that sit at the very foundation of the American financial system, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, entities kept alive by taxpayer support, entities still under conservatorship, entities whose compliance with the law is not optional but essential. What followed was not a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a repeated insistence that responsibility lies elsewhere, that oversight belongs to someone else. That alignment exists, meetings happen, conversations occur, but accountability remains elusive. And this is where the exchange crossed a line. Because when taxpayer-owned institutions fall out of compliance, when governance structures are hollowed out, when independence is replaced by political loyalty, the issue is no longer technical. It is moral. It is about whether laws exist to be followed or merely referenced when convenient. It is about whether public servants view their role as stewards of the public trust or as temporary occupants of power, insulated from consequence. Senator Reed did not raise his voice. He did not resort to spectacle. He did something far more unsettling. He laid out the facts, the bailout, the ownership stakes, the warrants, the leverage that undeniably exists, and then he asked the question that cuts through every bureaucratic shield. What about following the law? That question hung in the room unanswered. And when the senator finally addressed the tone, the posture, the manner in which these responsibilities were being treated, it wasn't about decorum. It was about seriousness. About whether those entrusted with managing trillions of dollars and safeguarding the financial stability of the nation grasp the weight of that duty. This is what moments like this reveal. Not just policy disagreements, but character under pressure. Not just ideological divides, but a widening gap between power and humility, between authority and accountability. In hearings like this, we are reminded that democracy does not erode all at once. It frays. It weakens through small acts of avoidance, through normalized deflection, through leaders who speak fluently about alignment, but hesitate when asked to enforce the rules. The American system depends on something fragile. Not just laws written on paper, but people willing to uphold them, even when it is inconvenient, especially when it is inconvenient. When oversight becomes a game of jurisdictional hot potato, the public loses. When responsibility is endlessly deferred, trust dissolves. This exchange was not about one senator and one secretary. It was about a culture of governance. About whether institutions exist to serve the public or to shield those in power. About whether economic policy is guided by lived reality or insulated by elite distance. And it is moments like this, unscripted, uncomfortable, unfiltered, that allow the public to see behind the polished statements and prepared talking points, to see how leaders respond when pressed, when the facts are laid bare, when the law is no longer theoretical. Accountability does not demand perfection, it demands honesty. It demands engagement. It demands respect for the role and for the people whose lives are shaped by decisions made in rooms like this. Because when leaders fail to take responsibility, it is not abstract. It is felt in higher bills, in unstable housing, in a system that seems increasingly distant from those it claims to serve. This hearing offered a glimpse into that reality, a reminder that power without accountability corrodes from within, and that democracy survives not through silence, but through scrutiny. If you believe these moments matter, if you believe the public deserves clarity, responsibility, and truth from those in power, support our work. Stay informed, stay engaged, and subscribe to Liberty Report USA.